2030.
Saudi Arabia, the point of investment fund,
It's a
there's
big
a lot of
vision.
excitement
This
around
transformational
NEOM specifically.
change. Every aspect of the kingdom, economic, social, cultural, religious.
The 2030.
This is the 2030.
Yalla.
Hala wala doctora and everyone. This is the 2030 podcast. Dr. Hanaa Al-Moayed, nice to see you. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well. Once again, we find you at a studio that is not the home studio. You are the world traveler these days. Tell everyone about where you are.
I am in Kirkland, Washington, which is a small suburb of, well, it's not that small, but it's a suburb of Seattle, Washington State in the U.S.
Yes, the U.S., baby. We're both in the U.S. right now, which is super exciting. First time for this podcast. Really cool. Actually, you know what? No, you were in L.A. earlier this year. So, but then I was in Riyadh. So this is the first time we both are in the U.S. We have a really great episode. This episode, for episode 21, we're going to be talking about a new city being set up and on which ground has been broken outside of Riyadh. It's not really a city, it's part of Riyadh, but it's a huge real estate development. We'll get to that in a moment, and we will finish up with some very fresh news, as we always do.
Yes, looking forward to it. Yeah, but we're on opposite ends of the country, aren't we? Like different coasts.
We are on
representing the West Coast over
different
here.
Coasts. Yes, we've got the whole coasts covered, and then you know there's a lot of ground in between us. At least 3 hours of time difference. But yes, this is an American Saudi-focused podcast today. This feedback from Rawan 743. Rawan, that's how you say Rawan, right? Rawan 743. Yo, Lucien, long time. Started following your podcast, the 2030, after seeing your interview with Fatima Batouk on LinkedIn. This is awesome, which was written in all caps. Thank you for that. And now I listen to the episodes in my car and I look forward to them. P.S. Dr. Hanaa is amazing. It feels like I get to hang out with both of you too. LOL. See you in Riyadh soon, inshallah. Thank you for that, Rawan. We appreciate that. You can send us feedback in any form, but we have emails set up, Lucien at the2030.com and Hanaa at the2030.com. You can also email both of us to our catch-all email address at hosts@2030.com. Of course, LinkedIn is another great way to drop us a line. We're getting a lot of feedback there as well. And then social media sites, Instagram, TikTok, Snap, wherever, just say what's up. Any feedback is appreciated there. So thank you for that, Rawan. We try to read it at the beginning of every show just to kind of build out the community a little bit here. We haven't gotten a ton of negative feedback still, so we're still waiting for that. Maybe we're just crushing it and there's just nobody, everybody loves it. But yeah, if you have any kind of critical suggestions, we always welcome those as well. So
any recommendations, programming recommendations, anything in particular that you would like us to address? All suggestions are welcome. I mean, you can kind of tone down the negative feedback if you're going to send it, but please do send us suggestions so we can improve what we are producing for you. Yeah,
you can tone it down for Dr. Hanaa, but if you have something really negative and you don't want to tone it down at all, it goes right to Lucien at the 2030. I don't mind at all. And yeah, we're going to be introducing a new little mini segment at the end of news today. It's called Shoutouts. We want to have a space on this program where we can maybe acknowledge some of what our friends or even just people we know or know of, what they're doing, why it's important to Saudi Arabia. It's, you know, not quite a news segment. It's not quite feedback on here, but we're going to call it, you know, maybe Shoutouts or something like that. But a little space at the end on a positive note of people doing some cool things with some words of encouragement for them. So anyway, we're going to beta test that out this week. We'll see how it goes, but hopefully that's a good way to kind of put a bow on the end of these shows for everybody. So anyway, Dr. Hanaa, let's get to a deep dive.
Let's get to a deep dive.
Okay, deep dive today. It's actually kind of like a news item that this could have gone in a news discussion, but as I was reading about this, I kind of wanted to make it a little bit of a larger discussion, but it's not going to be a full deep dive where we go, 100 meters below the water and we're like on the seafloor, but kind of wanted to talk about this new city. It's not a city, it's part of Riyadh, but it's a huge sort of neighborhood being built outside of Riyadh. It's the first I've heard of it, and I saw news about it recently in the last day or two. It's called Banan City, and is that right, or is it Banan City? Like banyan tree. Is it Banan?
No, Banan. Yeah. Banan.
Okay, Banan City. It's a sprawling new 10 square kilometers municipality northeast of Riyadh, and it's being built right now as Saudi Arabia prepares for World Expo 2030. This development is near where the World Expo 2030 will sort of be displayed. And of course, you have World Cup 2034. And just generally, Saudi Arabia with Vision 2030 has placed the cinder block firmly on the gas pedal with Vision 2030 reform. So this kind of fits into that whole thing. And I want to talk about real estate in Saudi Arabia in general, and also kind of housing in Saudi Arabia in general in a little bit. But about this project, Banan City, the project will feature over 20,000 smart homes for 120,000 residents with a gated community, according to the website of Saudi Talat Mustafa Group, which I'm sure I mispronounced, a real estate developer involved with the project. The group announced that construction work has commenced in the Al Farsan suburb. Operations are ongoing around the clock, adhering to construction schedules and plans. Of course, you cannot have the guys out there in the midday sun these days, as we discussed on a previous episode. Heavy equipment fully deployed to speed up the process and deliver the units as soon as possible. The project is also under the patronage of the housing minister, Majid Al-Hugail, and the National Housing Company. Quote, the effort is part of NCH's commitment to achieving the goals of the housing program, one of the initiatives under Vision 2030, which aims to raise home ownership rate for Saudi Arabia's families to 70%. The group said the plan aims to create a balanced lifestyle with various housing options, including apartments, villas, and family homes. The design will incorporate essential services such as shopping malls, healthcare facilities, schools, recreational areas to meet the diverse needs of Saudi society. The city has a total of 8 educational institutions as part of it, with 4 male schools and 4 female schools, along with nurseries, the company said. So we're seeing some modernity and tradition kind of coming together here with the schooling. Banan City will integrate smart city tech, such as security and surveillance systems, sensors for various dangers, renewable energy solutions by integrating solar and smart grids, along with smart irrigation services, intelligent lighting, waste collection, and separation services. So there's more details here. I'm just going to get to them and we can kind of talk about it. But potential buyers right now can choose from 6 types of villas ranging from 216 to 413 square meters. There are also plans to build 4 apartment blocks with 1 to 3 bedroom units. The foundation for the project was laid in May, according to Asharq Al-Awsat, and reported on July 9th that the group told the Egyptian Stock Exchange that Banan City had achieved unprecedented sales and surpassed its year 1 target in just 2 months, which directly speaks to the housing shortage in Riyadh, something with which I have very tight familiarity with. So it's kind of really interesting to see Saudi Arabia's housing market take shape. You sort of have these cities where, at least Riyadh and Jeddah, and perhaps in the eastern province as well, where there's just kind of a change in demographics. And this harkens back to our conversation with our official guest contributor for the 2030, the one and old Faisal Durrani, who talked about their recent report on attitudes toward moving towards Saudi Arabia and living in Saudi Arabia, and who's buying houses and what houses are being sold for and how much they are and how they're spread around and what supply is being spread around the kingdom. In that conversation, I think you remember, Dr. Hanaa, we talked a little bit about how one of the untapped demographics in the global south in general really is rich Muslims who are eyeing homes actually in Mecca and Medina in Saudi Arabia. Of course, we talk a lot too about the giga projects, the line. That's usually where the discussion goes, certainly here in the United States first, when you talk about anything Saudi Arabia, and then especially about housing, is a lot of the new housing and investment opportunities for real estate are going to be in some ways tied to some of these giga projects, right? Diriyah, Numaraba, the line, and even my incomparable co-host's favorite of the giga projects, none of the above, instead of opting for the rig so she can be close to home, although it'd be a boat ride for you or maybe a helicopter ride, I don't know. But there now is kind of data coming out on the housing market from last year, and there's a big lag with housing market data typically, especially in Saudi Arabia. But in the third quarter of last year, this is according to a CBRE report, the total number of transactions recorded was 61,473 real estate transactions. That's just in the third quarter of last year. Again, that's a year old, almost a year old now. But what you're kind of seeing here is the actual development of Saudis who are interested in buying homes and interested in having their own home, the movement away from family style living and homes and more to smaller households. So what you need for that is supply. And what you're seeing with Banan City here is sort of one of those projects that isn't the giga project, that isn't really necessarily a PIF thing, but it's just a private sector, public-private sector partnership, you probably would call this, of a way to supply homes. Of course, you have Roshan doing this as well, and that's a PIF company. Riyadh and Saudi Arabia in general has now eyed partnerships with both East and West to meet their housing demand. Just a few weeks ago, the kingdom's Minister of Municipal, Rural, and Housing Affairs, Majid Al Hugail, met with Beijing's Ambassador Shang Hua at the ministry headquarters in Riyadh to reiterate real estate relations between China and Saudi Arabia. Of course, as an American, I say, oh no to that, but Saudi Arabia is interested in finding solutions to these problems of having people be able to not just find houses, but afford them. Anyway, back to Banan City, just to put a bow on this thing. Hesham Talat Mustafa, chairman of the group, projected the development's revenue at around 40 billion Saudi riyals, $12 billion, with a total investment cost estimated at 31.4 billion riyals, 8.4 bill. So he's looking for a $3.6 billion profit when this thing is all said and done. And while a specific completion date was not provided, again, they just laid the stones down on this thing, so they're just gearing up. The project is, as I mentioned earlier, it's really close to the Future World Expo 2030 site. And so that may suggest that they may be aiming for this Banan City to be done by then so they can make units available before the end of the decade. So just a cool thing that you maybe didn't hear about. It kind of wasn't like top of all my feeds. And I saw this thing and, a $12 billion real estate development in Riyadh that isn't necessarily a PIF project or isn't a giga project is a significant contribution to both supply and probably also affordability. Although, as you noted when we chatted about this before the show, Dr. Hanaa, that it does say gated in that first sentence. So you wonder if it's going to be more of a separate area or if it's going to be compound style. I doubt that because of its size, but it's interesting. So welcoming your input now on this, just think this was kind of a cool thing to note.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Actually, when looking it up, one of the first sites that comes up, if you look up Banan in Arabic, you get the Sekeni website, right? And then from there, it talks about what you can inquire about and what you can which types of properties are available, which is pretty interesting. And you can kind of scroll through, look at what the development's going to look like and the size and how many, basically the layout of the different housing units that they're building. And so, yeah, I wonder about gated community because I think it just means that there are services that are going to be available to the people that are in these residences that are kind of specifically targeting them instead of just open to the public. So it might not necessarily be, definitely with its size, it can't be like a compound, but it does seem like there's going to be some interesting services, as you mentioned. But when I'm looking too, you can look at the types of villas, the types of apartments that are there, the features and facilities, as you mentioned, sports and social clubs, schools, commercial centers. So it is kind of it's an integrated city almost inside of a city. Yeah,
which is cool. How do the houses look? Is it like cool and modern Salmani style? Like what are we talking about here? Because I didn't really see any renderings.
Yeah, well, they're kind of designed as older with older Saudi architecture, and they're pretty cool. It's obviously, again, the headlines talk about it being a smart design, like these are smart homes. So I think that means there's a lot of tech that's integrated into them, thinking about how to minimize kind of your carbon footprint while maximizing space, luxury, facilities, whatever it is that you're looking for. But it's not just villas, which is a big part of it, but there's also apartments that are available. So I think it's targeting different levels of income, different different family sizes, different orientations as well. So it's pretty interesting.
There's a ton of Saudi interest. This is a broad statement, but these bigger projects, they're very interested in the smart city concept and having things be elevated from that standpoint. So that goes from everything to your thermostat to entering your door, and then having sort of some of your facilities and some of your services be app enabled so that your life is just generally has a lot less friction to it. And they feel like that is going to help attract not just local buyers, but international buyers who really maybe are making Riyadh or other parts of Saudi Arabia their second home or a third home or a work address. And they want those people to feel like it's really easy to live there. So talking with some people from New Maraba a few weeks ago, this was just like the front and center of their mind. It was like, how do we make this not just really, top level of, tech-enabled smart city development, but actually just a step above that where it's almost seamless and everything about your life there is digitized and easy so that you don't really have to think about these things. And so it's interesting to see that mentioned kind of heavily in the press release for this thing. And then also just sort of seeing like, how Saudi Arabia it's a very actually tech-enabled place. Smartphone penetration is insanely high. You have a very young population as well. So this kind of falls in line with that to me. But yeah, no, I need to check out some of these villas. I don't see a starting price. I'm sure there's a sales center though that they would be happy to engage with. But yeah, very cool. So do you know where
there is a price. Yeah, 1.1 million for Riyals for let me see, what is this exactly? Which unit is this? It looks like between a 3 and 5 bedroom, 5 and 9 bathroom. So I think there's a range here. 424 square meters. It looks like there are some big ones.
So there should be, so there'll be a good offering, a smorgasbord of selections for you to choose. Where is this? I'm trying to figure this out.
It is in northern Riyadh. It lists some of the closest places to it is Princess Noor University and the airport. So I think if you think about like when you're leaving the airport and you're looking at all this land, that's where this is going to be.
Okay. So that is where like all my boys are like, God, if I had just bought a bunch of land up here like 5 years ago, I would be so wealthy. No, these look really nice and really cool. Twin villa, Quattro villa type T1. Yeah, 5 bathrooms. Let's go.
But I think what's also interesting is like if you're looking at the Sekeni website, it also tells you, kind of which banks you can go to maybe get funding to buy one of these, right? So you have multiple banks that are partnering with the project. And so I think that's another thing to really think about is they're trying to make this accessible. You can get basically you can get funding, you can apply online for it. It even seems through Sekeni, which is pretty cool. And it's interesting also that Talat Mustafa Group, this is their Saudi division, but it seems that this is an Egyptian construction company, or at least it was established in Egypt initially. So I think, there are some interesting kind of construction companies that are coming into the kingdom as well and developing things in different ways. I like that partnership dimension to this development as well.
There's like a little kind of graphic demonstrating like how big this community is. This is huge. I mean, like this is massive. I don't know. It's probably not anywhere close to the size of Diriyah, but yeah, I kind of get a sense of the scale for it here on this website. But yeah, that's interesting. And I think this is an Egyptian company with a partnership with Al Muhadib Group.
Muhadib.
And Al Muhadib, thank you. So good to have a half Saudi, fully Arabic speaking co-host so I don't sound like a total dummy. But yeah. And then the NHC is obviously heavily involved in this. There's a picture of, I guess, a signing ceremony. You see both suits and thobes here. So very cool. 15-minute drive from the airport. So yeah, just if we had the 2030 crystal ball out and could just look and just had bought land here, this would have been a really, really good move. But who knows? Anyway. Let's get to the news.
Let's get to the news.
I'm going to kick us off. Following our deep dive recently on stadiums in Saudi Arabia, of course, this was perfectly timed to not be included in this segment. But after we released that segment on a new stadium in Saudi Arabia's capital, Riyadh, the New Murabba Stadium, Saudi Arabia now says it plans to also build a 92,000 capacity stadium in Riyadh that can host major international events, with the kingdom set to win the right to host the 2034 World Cup. Of course, that was just finalized this week with His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. The Saudi Sports Ministry unveiled the approved design for the stadium, which is scheduled to be completed in the fourth quarter of 2029, according to the state news agency SPA. The stadium is set to serve as the main base of the Saudi national team and will be part of a sports complex featuring an indoor sports hall, an Olympic-sized pool, and other facilities. It will be named after Saudi King Salman.
This design was chosen from several submissions by 6 international companies, ensuring that it meets FIFA requirements and standards of sustainability and architectural excellence, authorities said. As we know, in March, Saudi Arabia launched its campaign to host the 2034 World Cup. And as you mentioned, Lucien, it was just finalized this week, which is very exciting. And I think it's generating so much more excitement within the kingdom as well about sports in general, but specifically about soccer or football. The bid is all but certain to succeed due to the absence of any other expressions of interest before FIFA's deadline late last year. So this week, we saw basically our Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman being congratulated on completing its bid to host the 2034 World Cup, which was submitted to FIFA officials in Paris on Monday, a couple days ago, by a delegation headed by the Saudi Minister of Sports, Abdulaziz bin Turki bin Faisal, and President of the Saudi Football Federation, Yasser Al-Mishal.
Yeah, well, what's so cool about this is this obviously is going to be the crown jewel in at least Riyadh's stadium's offering, which we did talk about in a deep dive, so I don't want to go too much into it, but you now are looking at 3 new stadiums that are all sweet, that are all like architecturally impressive and really cool. They're built with the surrounding community around them. I thought the inclusion of the word Olympic-sized pool in there was very interesting as well. And I also think that this is just like, if you look at it now, and when these stadiums are built, you still have the other stadiums that are in Riyadh. I mean, it's kind of going to become, when you have these being used, especially for the Saudi Pro League, the Roshan Pro League, technically, it's sort of like you're looking at sort of a sports city, and you're looking at the development of stadiums across Saudi Arabia that are also sweet. So I'm kind of like, this is going to be the crown jewel in all of them. It will be double the size of the New Murabba Stadium, and also His Royal Highness the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman Stadium, which will be at Qiddiya. Very, very cool. I just wish that they had rolled this out 1 week later, or maybe 4 weeks after the segment, so we didn't look like we just missed it. But very cool.
So I think it's 15 stadiums and 5 cities that are going to be in the 2034 World Cup bid, which is pretty exciting. So, I mean, I think we're going to hear more and more about the stadiums that are being developed. So I feel like, there was a big push to build stadiums under King Abdullah, and now there's just an expansion of that. But there were some very ambitious kind of plans for stadiums that were built, and it was a really exciting time when that was announced back in the day. So it's exciting now that some of those stadiums will also be used in addition to these new ones that are being developed.
Yep, seems like a century ago, doesn't it?
It does seem like forever ago. Yeah. Okay. Saudi economy shrinks for 4th straight quarter on OPEC plus curbs, according to a Bloomberg report. The kingdom's economy contracted at a slower pace before a likely turnaround starting this quarter, and a stretch of declines that began a year ago as the effect of OPEC plus oil production cuts begin to wane. This is from Bloomberg. Gross domestic product shrank an annual 0.4% in the April-June period, according to the preliminary data published by the General Authority for Statistics on Wednesday, which is an improvement from a 1.7% drop in the previous 3 months. Forecasts compiled by Bloomberg show that the $1.1 trillion economy is set to return to growth in the third quarter with a gain of almost 4% in what would be the biggest acceleration since the end of 2022.
Yeah, there's a quote from Carla Slim, an economist with Standard Chartered, who said pretty firmly in this piece, quote, "We expect this to be the last quarter of deeply negative hydrocarbon sector growth. The overall decline last quarter was primarily driven by an 8.5% contraction in the oil sector, kind of highlighting how important the oil sector still is. But activity in the non-oil economy grew by an annual 4.4%, up from 3.4% in the prior 3 months. That is the name of the game for Saudi Arabia right now. The kingdom's second quarter budget deficit came in at 15.3 billion riyals, $4.1 billion, according to data by the Ministry of Finance. Also showing, just as I said, how reliant the government still is on hydrocarbon revenue. But still, reversing a broader downturn has taken on more urgency for His Royal Highness the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's Vision 2030 plan that will require hundreds of billions of dollars in new investments. The International Monetary Fund recently, and we discussed this on the show, cut its estimate for Saudi GDP growth this year to 1.7% from 2.6% in April. We mentioned this in kind of the news segment because this is as kind of big picture as you get when it comes to Saudi Arabia. We like to kind of be all over the place with focus and then kind of bringing it out. But this kind of gives you a sort of overall look. You have the Saudi economy really focusing, I should say the authorities really focusing on the non-oil sector of the economy and doing whatever it can to get that to be built out and stable and solid, because the oil economy, as many know, Saudi Arabia can have some influence internationally, but there's a lot of externalities that go with oil prices and production. And of course, Saudi Arabia is de facto head of OPEC plus. So you just sort of have basically two balls that Saudi Arabia is juggling, and they really want the non-oil economy to just keep growing and building and developing. And they want the oil economy to be powering that growth as much as they can. But it's actually in this, a little bit of a downturn, a 4-sector kind of downturn that they've had, looks like there's light at the end of the tunnel. And during that time, with the non-oil economy really pumping, this is actually pretty good news. Global sports management and production powerhouse IMG has inked a 5-year production partnership with the Saudi Pro League and the Saudi Arabian Football Federation. The deal covers the main tournaments in the kingdom's fast-growing soccer league, which boasts global soccer superstar Cristiano Ronaldo. You may have heard of him, among other household names. Starting from 2024 to 2025 season, IMG will take on the role of broadcast producer, on top of being distributor outside the Middle East and North Africa region for the Roshan Saudi League, King's Cup, and Saudi Super Cup in tandem with their partners.
According to Omar Mgharbel, the CEO of the Saudi Pro League, quote, "Our new production partnership marks a significant step forward for the SPL as we continue our transformation and growth on and off the pitch. The strategic collaboration will ensure best-in-class production quality, innovation, and consistency across all RSL Saudi Super Cup and King's Cup matches," the statement said. So global soccer governing body FIFA has said football. I think you wrote this, Lucien. Global football governing body FIFA
almost
has
had you
said,
saying soccer. Almost.
I tried. It does not roll off my tongue anymore. But I am in the US at the moment, so I'm needing to figure out which term to use. But anyway, they've said that soccer clubs from the kingdom last year were among the 5 biggest spenders in the international players transfer market, shelling out $970 million in 2023 compared to $50.4 million in 2022.
You're right. I did write this, and I wrote it because I wanted you to share the story of you seeing a young kid, your son's age, at a soccer camp wearing what kind of jersey was it? Al Hilal?
Al Hilal. Yeah, I think
in Seattle.
Not even in Seattle, but like in our little Seattle suburb. So basically it's so exciting when that happens. You see kids wearing Nasr Al Hilal jerseys and you're like, what is going on? How is this even possible? So Faris, I pick him up. He's wearing his Arsenal kit, of course. And then I'm like, oh, what? Is that a Saudi kid? And he was like, no, that's just whatever. It's, another boy that's signed up for the camp that lives here. And he's wearing a Hilal jersey.
That is so amazing. So this is good. So media really, I mean, you can have all the best soccer players, football players in the world playing on a pitch. If no one sees it, did it really happen? Media is so important for sports. Nobody does it better than America. I must say that and inject that right now, because so much of sports is getting the sports out, broadcasted out and around the world, because it's the ultimate soft power, of course, but it's also an unbelievable marketing opportunity for all of those involved. And then it really grows the game. So when you have a tie-up like this with IMG and SPL, what you have is really a larger megaphone for what is happening. And having seen many Saudi Pro League games this year, living in Riyadh this winter, was just the quality of the game. That was one of the things that was shocking to me as somebody who knows very little bit about soccer, that I played a lot growing up. I mean, these guys are awesome. The games are really competitive and really good, and a larger audience for these games, you'll have more fans worldwide. And so having IMG now as part of the mix, I don't know how the deal was set up, but was probably not inexpensive, but you now have a much bigger megaphone, and all of IMG's partners that work with them will also be somewhat corralled into this deal. This is awesome for the Saudi Pro League.
Very cool. Yeah. I mean, that in combination with some of the news of who's actually going to make it to the Saudi teams starting next season, all of that is very exciting. So we'll see where all of these players end up, but there's definitely a bit of a reshuffle going on at the moment.
Yep. Amazing. Okay. Before we conclude episode 21 here of the 2030, want to introduce a new segment here. We're calling it Shoutouts now. Maybe we'll come up with a more clever word. We just kind of wanted to throw out some dabs, some, applause to people either we know or people we don't know who are in Saudi Arabia, are Saudis, or are doing business in Saudi Arabia, something to do with Saudi Arabia, that are doing things that are good and positive. And we just want to give them a little bit of a pat on the back. And for the first one, we each have one today. For the first one, I would like to give a shout out to my very dear friend, Abdulrahman Al-Gaban, or as my children call him, Uncle Ramen. Building Smart International has tapped Abdulrahman Al-Gaban, who is president of Saudi Arabian Bechtel Company, to be chairman of Building Smart Saudi Arabia, a new chapter that has been established in Riyadh. And he said, and he shared the news from Building Smart International, which is sort of an organization that has chapters all around the world and is now having its first in Riyadh. He said in a quote that was shared by Building Smart International that he is looking forward to establishing a Building Smart chapter in Saudi Arabia, which is a pivotal step towards advancing our construction industry to global standards. This chapter will serve as a catalyst for implementing cutting-edge digital solutions, fostering collaboration, and driving innovation in building practices. So the reason why I just wanted to include this, obviously give a shout out to my boy, but also because I think this is a really cool thing that he's doing that is sort of outside of his normal work mandate to kind of grow the ecosystem around him in Saudi Arabia. And so really proud of him for his work. He's the most generous person I've ever met. And it's just really cool that he is helping Building Smart to establish and expand in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So shout out Uncle Ramen. Congratulations.
Congratulations to Abdurrahman. I would like to give a shout out to Samara Sultan. So she is an executive at Meta. She's one of the first Saudi, I believe she's the first Saudi woman to work in Meta. She is based out of Ireland, and she recently shared some very exciting news. For the first time in her career, she was nominated not just for one, but 3 categories in the prestigious Diversity in Tech Awards 2023. Basically, the first one was Tech Leader Award for her exceptional leadership, fostering growth, innovation, and building a motivated team in an organization with 100 plus employees. The second one was the Trailblazer Award, recognizing her success in tech that sparked inspiration and paved the way for other women to excel in the sector. And Digital Transformation Award in recognition of her tech savviness and ability to drive transformation, innovation, and yield positive business outcomes. So I think that that is a huge recognition, and she shared this news and was congratulated also on LinkedIn by Trinity Business School careers consultant who basically was very excited that one of their alumna was recognized with these awards. So congratulations to Samar, who is a change maker and a very kind of exciting person to follow on LinkedIn, always sharing really positive news on what's happening in the kingdom, and is a force to be reckoned with.
Well, Mabruk, Samar, and Abdul Rahman, I'm glad you used the word changemaker. That's part of all of our marketing material here for the 2030. It's something that we really want to focus on with this podcast because there are many of them in and outside of Saudi Arabia that are making the kingdom's Vision 2030 happen. They're the actual people that are driving it forward all the way from the top, all the way to the bottom. And so I love that you used that word, Mabruk, Abdul Rahman, and Samar. Dr. Hanaa, thank you very much.
Thank you.